Tonight we're joined by Tom Farley, my friend, from back home in Wisconsin.
This is incredible. I mean, and so many levels. But I mean, because I love the recovery aspect. But I mean, like you got that. I mean, this was amazing. Like I'm Catholic, so all I get is I get a piano and a sad choir. That's it. I'm like, wow, you've ruined it for me.
Yeah, he might be coming to the other side. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But no, Tom, your story is so incredible for so many reasons. And tonight we're going to talk about loving people in recovery. We're going to talk about family members and affected loved ones. We have a little bit of time to do that tonight. But I want to ask you all first, how many of you love someone in recovery? Yeah? Is it always easy? No, your hands are going down.
I can't see you.
Yeah. I don't know. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's hard. And I remember, one of the reasons I wrote my book, which is out there, is because my own family didn't understand what the journey was all about. And when I was struggling really deeply in active addiction and then into recovery, my family needed to learn more. And it's been a great experience writing that. And Tom is actually in that book. And part of the reason, Tom, I want to ask you a couple questions tonight. You have a very well-known story of addiction, a little more less known story of recovery in your family. Can you share a little bit about what the hardest part was for you and your family?
Well, it's funny. I talk a lot about, in healing, and I got this from my brothers, went into comedy, and you learn this thing called improv, which is about connection and creating an ensemble. And I use that in a lot of my recovery work. But I realized that the first ensemble you have is your family, where everyone matters and everyone brings something different, and the best ensembles are the ones that welcome people in with all their otherness, and that's makes it so rich and interesting. But with families, certainly with my family, we took the opposite approach. We wanted to show the world this perfect definition of family, and we tried to maintain that narrative as much as we could. And so when one of us started to show signs of struggling, even though we all were, in that, at least started out with just as much need for healing, when one of us was a little bit more acute, it was easy for us to point to Chris and say, well, we're not that bad. And mostly it was because we were fearful of being honest about our own issues. So it was easier to not only to paint Chris as he's the one with the problem, but it was easier also to maintain that narrative to the real world of that this family is still perfect. We're working on Chris. And that really, it built up walls. I'm sure it was the first step of kind of losing this important person of the ensemble. And I don't know what it was like. I can imagine what it was like for Chris, because now I'm there now in my own recovery. Pushing that person more into isolation had to be horrible. Yeah. And so that's why your book was so really important to me. I've talked about recovery from having a sibling with addiction issues, losing that sibling to this disease, my own recovery journey in being a parent, and I kind of like the family issues. I'll get to that. So you made me dig up all that trauma. Thank you. But it was really helpful. But I needed to go there. It was really easy, and especially being a parent too. What I learned was, parents we're hardwired to solve things, and what we don't know is you can't solve it, and you can't love somebody out of addiction. You just need to be where they are and understand them. And I know when I started my own recovery journey and people tried to solve things for me, I'm I don't need you to solve things. It really pushed me away. I needed you to understand where I was, or how isolated I was.
Can I ask you a question? So knowing what you know now,
Yeah.
with what your family experienced, and then losing your brother to addiction, almost, was it a little over 30 years ago now?
Almost 30, yeah.
And with your own recovery, what would you do different? And what are you doing different today with your, with your own family? But looking back, what would you have done different in your family?
I think I would have rigorous honesty. Like when I got into recovery and I, heard those words, I'm like, and not seem so, hypocritical, like you're the one that needs help and not me. I'm like, and like clearly it was both of us at least. I would have. I've said one of the things I miss about Chris more than anything. Now that I'm in recovery, I wish that we would have been in recovery together, to talk about these things, but we never did, And even when Chris was in recovery, we thought it was all about substance use and drinking, and no, that was just what we ended up with. It was all the trauma that why what made us go there? How isolated were we? And I think I would have talked about that as something I keep coming back to in my own recovery is this need for connection. And now I just I want to get. No, you're staying here. You had your chance. Just a constant need for connection, and not being in this place of isolation. And I would have tried so hard, to see where Chris was in his isolation, admit to where I was. I think just as brothers, being honest and vulnerable, and really trusting and accepting him, and not try to change him.
Yeah. Well, and I've heard you tell this story a couple times. I'd love for you to share it because I think a lot of us remember Chris Farley as the actor and just hilarious skits on SNL. Not always family friendly, but
they didn't have to share a bedroom with him though.
Yeah, you shared a bedroom with him. That would have been, I don't know. But there's a story you share of Chris in recovery. And we heard the stories of his struggle. What was your brother like in recovery? What did he do well, and what was it like seeing that?
First, I didn't know what I was seeing, because my barometer was like, drinking or not drinking. I didn't know what recovery was, and I just saw this. First of all, he was, we were both living in New York. He was on SNL, and I always thought he was. I didn't think he was that talented, but everyone else did. But then I just saw, him explode and just got so good, and it really wasn't because of his talent. It was because it was Chris in recovery. It was him being genuinely, authentic and honest. But to me, I just saw well, he's dressing better. I didn't know, But then there was this one time he called me up. He said, "Tommy, can you come to this meeting? I'm going to." Speak and chair at a meeting. It's my 3rd-year anniversary, and I'm like, what meeting? I didn't know what he was talking about. But I'm like, all right, I'll be supportive. And I gave me an address, and I started walking in New York toward this place that he would meet at least every week. And I got deeper and deeper into this horrible neighborhood. It actually was Hell's Kitchen. And I thought, he gave me the wrong address, that son of a gun. And no, but I found the address, and I walked upstairs, and it looked like they had taken everyone from the neighborhood up into this room, and Chris was at the front, standing in the back, and there he was in his little blue blazer, and he's in this whole, crowd that I've never seen him, that he was with. And I heard him say, I'm no different from any of you in this room. And I'm in the back of the room come on, man, you're a little different. You're on Saturday Night Live, with this crew? And with all the sincerity and humility I've ever seen him say, no, we all woke up this morning, praying to a higher power that we were going to be clean and sober, and we did it. However we did it, he got us here, and we get cake and coffee as a reward. How great is life? And I'm like, who is that? Who is this guy? I didn't understand, until I got into my own recovery, and like, I'm at my best in those same rooms, looking at not looking at who these people are, just feeling this sense of belonging that I know he felt, and I'm so sad that he lost that eventually and succumbed to this disease. But I did get to see just this brother in recovery, even though I didn't get it at the time, but I never forgot it.
Well, and I love that story so much. I think a lot of times we focus on addiction, which is important. How do we show up when our loved ones are struggling? 100%, absolutely. We need that information. And how do we support recovery? How do we show up and truly kind of walk alongside? I'm curious your perspective on Chris's recovery and now your recovery. How does that impact the family?
Well, I guess I'll start by saying I'm actually haunted by this image of this moment. Like it was a Christmas Eve. Chris had just gotten out of Hazleton for the second time working, but it was Christmas Eve, so we did what we always did. We all gathered, opening presents, but with brandies and beer, and we had all this fun. And I see it vividly of all of us there laughing and doing what we always did, but there was Chris with his mug of coffee, just trying to be sober with his family. And oh God, I would love to take that back and be there. And if it's just me to be there with him, I would have been. That was sad. But now I know, that's what and I tell that to families is it's not just that person's problem. It's this is your first ensemble. This is your family. Be there. However that is.
Yeah, so how can families show up? How do you start to heal that ensemble? And maybe how are you doing that in your family?
It's funny, and I'm going to jump to our little corporate culture in this little tech startup called recovery.com, but not everyone is in recovery. A few of us are. But I remember walking into my first marketing meeting, and I've been into some, big corporate cultures in marketing. And we went in, instead of going around the room talking about what's our strategy for the next month or what's going right, we ran around the room, and I remember Andrew, our boss, saying what are you grateful for? I'm like, hold the phone, man. We're starting a company meeting that way, and it's this company, even though no one's few are in recovery, but it's recovery. They get the principles of recovery, and families can do that too. Can you imagine how many times you sit around with your family and honestly talk about what you're all grateful for, just being in that place. I know what it feels like when gratitude hits me or serenity hits me, and I'm imagine a family that gets to feel that way together. I just really think that you don't have to be in recovery, as your book says, to love somebody in recovery and practice these principles of. It's really not. We don't do these things to stay sober. We do these things to feel human, And I didn't know what that felt like until I got into recovery and started doing these things. And to do that, I got to be sober. But it's really, this is what I want more than anything.
What would you say to that family? Because I know so many families are struggling with these concepts like enabling or, tough love. How do I show up? Am I going to harm someone by doing X, Y, or Z? What would you tell folks who are maybe struggling with some of those questions?
Well, again, meet people where they are, understand that it's all about isolation and survival, and understand if somebody is in complete survival mode, how are you going to talk them out of that? No matter what they say, they think if they do anything differently, their survival is at risk. Sometimes it's that bad, and you've got to accept that. And okay, care for them, but don't, as I said, enable them. Set boundaries where they have to, and I say that on both sides. As somebody's coming out of that and into recovery, like you got to set boundaries too, just like your family probably had to set boundaries with you. Like sometimes we have to set boundaries with with the family, but it's not isolation and it's not pushing people away. It's just boundary. It's just you can't. You got to do it in an open and honest way. You got to talk about this. This is how we're going. This is how we're going to be, and we're going to be this way because we value who we are as a family. This is we're a loving group. Let's not forget that we do these things because of this.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that image when you told that story about Chris sitting there with a cup of coffee, I could see that in my mind. And when you also shared about that meeting he was in, it was like he found another family too. And I think we get to do that in recovery. And you all, when you were having dinner back there tonight, I just had this image of like a holiday meal, where sometimes our families, it's really hard for folks to show up. We don't know what to do. And that's okay too. I think sometimes we can let that weight and that burden and that guilt go, because in recovery, we get to discover, and I believe God provides a new family, and not to get all preachy, Tom, but he sets the lonely in flame.
I literally was going to say that that, there's another chair at that table. I referenced before, like I'm a lifelong Catholic. We go to church every Sunday. I take my 90-year-old mother I got to get home actually to Wisconsin in a couple of days. But yet, in this instance, when I look at Chris in recovery or in, what was missing? Him, like that. Like it's a big part of who we are, our identity, our life. But like when it came to this, where was God in all that? And it just hit me just now in this environment. I'm like, that would have been kind of a natural thing for us to rely on, but I don't think we did as much as we could have. We did, but not as. Now being in recovery, and know how important, call it a higher power, which we do. And I was on a silent retreat once. Yeah, I was silent. No, I wasn't. I got in trouble. But I heard this priest said, this priest said, it's like, if you're higher, what did he say? If you still are, you still have fear, it just means your higher power isn't high enough. And I think that's what we had in our family, just so much fear. We didn't know what it was. We wanted to present this image to the rest of the world, and that just creates so much fear. And that's when your higher power needs to be higher, and it wasn't for us, sadly.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I know we have a couple more minutes. I'd like for you to talk about your experience in recovery now and kind of what you do. You work for recovery.com, but just your advocacy and your service to the community, kind of what that does. And I think, can you share too, because there's a lot of family members in the room, how important is giving back and being of service to recovery?
Not that important, but
I set that one
it's
up,
my whole
Tom.
life. But I don't look at it as giving back. It's me needing connection. I give back because I need this. Not only do I need connection, but even right now, don't misunderstand. I do this because I'm still healing. I need to heal, and you're helping me with that. I need to do this. I'm not here for you. I'm here for me. No, I'm kidding. I do this. I share. I do all that kind of stuff to heal, and all of a sudden somebody comes up and it says how I help them heal. It's like that connection is beautiful. We're both healing together. That's a beautiful thing. But So for me in recovery, I was, for most of my life, was putting out this person I thought I needed to be and the world wanted me to be. And in order to be that person, I needed to control everyone around me. I needed my family to be a certain way so I could be that person. I needed my employer to give me that job, not the one I have. You don't understand. I'm trying to like create this image of just like my family did. And it wasn't until I got in recovery and started hearing, rigorous honesty and yeah, it's funny. I've been in my career in marketing and PR, and I'm also Irish, so I know the gray areas of honesty, rigorous honesty, like that was a thing. So, but and humility, gratitude. When I started practicing those things, I realized that the person I was putting out to the world, like that person could never be rigorously honest or grateful or even humble, because that wasn't a real person. Only my authentic self could truly be those things. And once I started to really want those and be those things and have the vulnerability and the trust to like say like this is who I'm gonna show the world, then I really started to find like the connection came back to me. Before I was pushing people away, even charming and humorous and funny as I am, I was pushing people away. In recovery, though, just taking care of those things and being honest and not a threat to people and being grateful. Like people want to be it's people. That's recovery to me is really being the best human I can be, and just like all of a sudden like. Where did all these people go? I want a connection all my life. Where were you people? Like we just were waiting for you to be like a little bit more authentic. And I got it. I got it,
Yeah, so I like to say still, being of service, it heals us and we get to show up.
Yeah.
And we have a purpose outside of ourselves, which I think for families understanding that addiction recovery is not just about stopping something.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
It's about learning to walk in being new creations. And, family members and loved ones, we can help our loved ones do that. We can walk alongside them too. So, y'all, we're going to be wrapping up. I wish we had more time to talk, but we will, because you can come see us all out in the lobby. We've got some books, as Matt said, if we want to make sure they're accessible. All proceeds are going to go to support Cokesbury Recovery. And again, it's so nice to see you all in the room. Come back. All right, this happens every single week, and you're going to have some support groups after. So, Mark, I believe you're going to kind of pray us out and do the white chip thing. So thank you all so much
Thank you
for your time tonight. It's just been such a joy to be here.